I'd like to use this slide presentation to talk about the stasis paper that we were going to talk about in class Wednesday and missed because of snow. So I wanted to put this together. In class, I would have had you actually look at the paper and do some describing on your own. But since I don't have access to you at this moment, I thought I'd tell you why I chose this paper as one to show to students for the assignment. I consider this an exemplar paper. It's really well done. It nails the assignment, but it's also very straightforward and simple and elegant. It showcases the writer's interests in an area that her reader, in this case me, and certainly many of the other folks in class, didn't share. So she brought in expertise and gave us a chance to learn something. But it's just an elegantly done piece, and I thought it might help you with your revisions. The first thing that you should look at is the introduction, so that very first paragraph. What she does is try to situate the reader with the problem. She knows that many people don't know what cosplay is. Honestly, I'd never heard the word until I'd met Ash, and she told me about it. Her first paper that she wrote on Kairos was almost impossible for me to understand because I didn't know what cosplay was. And so in that process, she realized that though I could bring understanding to it, she needed to walk me through some things. So this introduction does this for people who don't have that perception. And what she does is she really sets up the arguments really well because she focuses on the stereotypes that we might have for someone who does cosplay, because that then plays into the arguments that she's looking at. So she talks about the background information for this, and that is just a really helpful thing. So she gets us immediately into what the content of the argument is, and that there's a disagreement that would have to be explained. Now, the next thing she does is she goes in to talk about what stasis is. So she's going to explain the argument. Now she's going to talk about the criteria she's using to explain it. And in this case, it's stasis. So she walks through what stasis is and why it's important. And notice the quotation she uses from Crowley, which she uses to support that stasis marks where two opposing forces come together, where they rest or stand in agreement on what is at issue. So the success of an argument is based on not who wins or loses from the perspective of stasis, but rather on the basis of whether or not folks are talking about the same thing. And that is what she is going to work on. Now, the other thing I really like about this paper is that she's got the conclusion up front. So she clearly says that on one hand, Stasi is discussing quality, while Melendez is discussing definition. She lets us know that that's what she's going to do before she does it. So that gives us a heads up of what's going to happen, and it's going to give us some patience as she goes through and talks about the arguments themselves. So she starts with the first argument, which is Linda Stasi's review of the sci-fi show. And she looks at the quality issue. Then she comes back to the other argument. And Melendez doesn't like the review of the show, even though she agrees, ironically, with Stasi that the show isn't good. What she disagrees with is Stasi's approach to the argument. And then she's able to show how that is an example of definition. The rest of the paper is developing those two problems, and then she moves into the conclusion. So she summarizes for us the kind of the bottom line that what Stasi does, what Melendez believes, and then she comes to the conclusion, which is that she basically sides with Melendez, that it's impossible to really review this show if you don't understand what it is that you're reviewing. And so Melinda successfully articulates that definition is a critical point at which Stasi needs to pause in order to move on to quality. So interestingly enough, not only does Ash use Stasi to talk about these two arguments, but Melinda's herself uses uses Stasis to argue that Stasi hasn't done a great job of the argument. So I think this paper can give you one example of a way to approach this. One of the things you can do is sketch out the organization for this paper, as I've done, and use that organization for your own work. And then also look at how much space Ash devotes to each section and the strategy she has for talking about it. I think you could just plug these things into place. The frustrating thing I think about some of these concepts is when we see other people use them, it can seem really simple and straightforward. And I think Ash's paper has the impact of, well, that was easy, you know, and I know that was the response to a lot of the folks in the class last fall. One thing you should know, though, is that the Kairos paper that she wrote was also on this topic, and that one she really struggled with. It wasn't nearly as straightforward in her head. Now, after she did the Stasis paper, going back and talking about Kairos was no problem. But there's a point at which you have to kind of wrestle through these arguments. Also, another reason I like this is that then Ash went on to have her blog focus on issues around cosplay. And I really like that she was able to connect all those things, because this analysis is not something that you do just for boring academic arguments, but also for things that you care about that can help you explain the nature of an argument and what's going on and why it's not productive in this particular case. I hope to see you on Monday after spring break. I hope we don't have any nasty weather. And as you're thinking about revision of your Stasis papers, use this one, keep this one in mind. And since we didn't have class on the Wednesday, on yesterday's class time, let's put off the deadline for the revisions until at least the Wednesday after spring break, because I want to give you a chance to meet with me if you have questions about Stasis. Finally, I want to say that the Kairos revisions have been posted. Many of you who did revisions have not had a grade change yet, and I encourage you to think of revision as being a really messy process. If we compare revision to remodeling of a house, keep in mind that the first thing that happens in a remodel is to make things worse. Things are really bad for a while, and then you can go back and put things back together. So I don't consider the work that you've done unproductive, but most of the time it takes at least 2 revisions to make a difference. So please don't get frustrated, and realize that you have undoubtedly made some progress and that we just need to go to the next step. I hope you have some time for rest and relaxation and a chance to get caught up, and that maybe we will actually get some sun. So I'll see you on the Monday after spring break. Thanks a lot.